Welcome, Thomas.
Hello, hi.
Today I'm hosting Thomas Kast. That is how you pronounce it, correct?
Yes.
As simple as it looks. I love it. He is a fantasy author, and we can just jump in. Tell us about your book.
My recent novel, The Great Convergence, is philosophical science fiction, but it's full of humor. I try to infuse it with as much humor as possible. It's about a nameless academic researcher who disappointed with his life time travels to the year 2022, and by the way, he lives 10 million years in the future. So there he competes for grand tenure and glory with his nemesis, Scott, and what they basically do in course of the rivalry, they sabotage each other, research and wreck reality beyond any recognition. And, you know, they all want to get at one another. So basically it's a tale of revenge, and as a bonus, you have some philosophical insights.
Very fun. So would you consider it hard sci-fi, or is this, well, you said there was humor in it, so I got that, but is it really, do you have a lot of technical things in it, or is it more fantasy sci-fi-ish?
Well, it's more of a fantasy sci-fi. I use a lot of weird terminology, which is all made up, but it underlines the pointlessness of academic life, and you know, it's basically one big jab at the world of academia, which, in my opinion, you know, kind of is closed off in this ivory tower thinking. But it's also it's a story about people. So the science, although it's there, and there's time travel, there's different universes and trans-universal portals, and you name it. But all in all, it's just a background to what's really going on. And what's going on is the struggles of my main heroes. And one of them, I mentioned, the nameless narrator, he's really is biased and he's lying most of the time. By the way, he narrates the story, so you have to read between the lies. He's not telling you the truth, and it's up to the reader to figure out what's really going on. And then there is Scott, and he portrays Scott as an ultimate evil, but is he really? And again, you have to make up your mind. There's Larry, is a disgruntled art critic who hates art. Now the thing with Larry is he's the so-called singular, which means that only one version of him exists in the whole multiverse. There's a bit of science, and what happens is he jumps between different realities, and things go south whenever he appears. He doesn't know this is happening. There's Jeffrey, who is a talentless artist who produces transdimensional portals. I mean, he doesn't know that these sculptures he creates to impress his girlfriend have this capacity, but this is what he ends up doing. And last but not least, there's Timothy, a genius astrophysicist who suffers from severe schizophrenia. He doesn't know whether the things he sees are real or not. He's trying to save the universe from invasion of alternative versions of himself coming from other worlds. And the reader doesn't know, is this his imagination? Are these things real? But it ends up, you know, all these characters ends up they create the Great Convergence, which is apocalyptic events, which I don't clearly explain what it is. You only know that it's something of profound meaning.
Interesting. And what part, or what inventions, or what are these astrophysicists, the characters in academia? Are they inventing bombs, or are they inventing things that help the world, or are they in this race just for ego?
Well, I think the last one would be most appropriate answer. I mean, they don't invent bombs. Obviously, they invent really strange things. So, for example, they have this lab in which they produce universes they can study, and some of these universes are damaged, so they can conduct whatever study they want, and then after they are done with the universe, they discard it. And at the university courtyard, there's a fountain which spews time, and each stream is a different time, and at one point there's some event going on, and the photographer falls into the fountain, and he comes up completely disfigured because all these different parts got hit by a different stream of time. Things of this nature. And the nameless narrator is he sits in his office, and they bring him some horrifying mutations because the university administration decides when they need space because they merged some departments, and they have to stick these things somewhere. And so he sits there surrounded by horrid, ghastly creatures staring at him, and eventually he starts throwing them into the furnace as an act of malevolent vengeance against the world. So anyway, things like that. There's a few other inventions they have. If I can bore you, for example, there's a lab where they grow nerve extremities in flower pots, and there are stalactites and stalagmites they can just tear off and stick into genome blenders and this kind of thing. But anyway, all this is oh, by the way, and of course everybody has a time machine in the garage, and it's this type of world. And time travel is pretty prevalent. In fact, in one of the appendixes, I relate the history of time travel, if anyone would be interested.
Very cool.
Oh, yeah. So this is but again, all of this is just a background, because again, the main story is about the characters, about people, about the struggles, about who they are, who they want to be, and why. But if you want some colorful depictions of the world 10 million years from now, well, you're gonna get it.
Fine. And have you made these characters or these stories from your personal experiences? Were you in academia yourself, or is this just something you've observed?
I'm an ex-academic. I've been a university lecturer for several years. And by profession, I'm an artist, I'm an illustrator and photographer. My wife is a scientist, and through her I gained interest of science and met many scientists. I work with many scientists, several universities. I create illustrations and photography for them. So the world of academia is well known to me with the problems and advantages and disadvantages. As for being an artist, I mean, I think there's a part of me in each of the characters, but my characters are pretty obnoxious people. I hope I'm not obnoxious, but I made them obnoxious. The reason being, I wanted them to be more relatable, and I didn't want my book to be just, shiny, happy people doing basically nothing, or characters that are so wonderful that you just, I don't know, you don't know what to do with them. So they all have real imaginary struggles, and they can be rude, they often act irrationally. Okay, they don't make the right decisions, or the decisions you would expect to be carried out by a sane person. But of course, they often under pressure, and they have conflicting agendas. So, reassuming, I would say many of my characters are based on real people, real events, but it's always a wild mix of everything put together.
Neat. Yeah, you definitely have to make characters relatable. If they're too perfect, happy, joy, they don't have that struggle that a reader can relate to, or you have to, I mean, even your hero might have a couple of flaws that you don't love, but in the end, hopefully they come through and be the hero, right?
Right. They have mostly flaws.
And making universes in a lab, this brings up a lot of ethical questions. Are there creatures in these universes that they're creating?
Yes, absolutely. They're
destroying?
fully fledged. Yeah, they're fully fledged universes. But here's the thing, because my book is essentially a satire on modern world. So nowadays we speak of animal rights, and we still grow mice in the lab, and we justify it in one way or another. Now, so everything in 10 years in the future, they have exactly the same problems, but it's all bigger. It's all more. I don't know. It has a different impact, but they still have this. There's just a couple of paragraphs where the narrator describes some hippie demonstrations and picketing outside of the university. But usually the interest subsides, and we can go back to saving humanity and doing our experiments on these universes. I don't know if it's maybe it's not too subtle, but yes, I mean, I never try to moralize. I never try to tell the reader what's right, what's wrong. The reader should make his or her mind, him or herself. I do, however, point out to certain shortcomings of our society, and whether it's good or bad, you have to decide. Again, my characters have their own voice and their own agenda. This is not necessarily me speaking, okay? This is what they say. This is not always my way of saying, well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. But this is again, the reader has to decide what to take from all of that.
Yeah, I think as authors, a lot of times goals can be just to make the reader think about it and think, wow, wait, just a minute, back up or rewind, or, let me wrap my brain about what that really means and how I feel about it.
Right. But that was the whole idea, to make people question the reality they live in, to read and reread certain passages, to, I don't know, I think that the impact of my novel is more important than what's really happening. This is how I envisioned it. I want people to think less about what it says, and more about what it says, and less about who did what to whom, and etc.
Right. Yeah. So I was in academia for a little while. I got my graduate degree, and was definitely, I mean, you saw certain professors that were more, or seemed more in it for the fame and glory than just the research, right? And you always have these characters in shows or books or movies that, to them, they are the hero of the story, because that's their passion, or their goal is, maybe their goal is to save humanity, but what else are you hurting along the way of all those other like creatures in these new universes that are just created and destroyed? It's a hard line when you're, it's good to think about those things though.
Yes, and I think it's time, especially in science fiction, because most of science fiction these days is about superheroes or robots and aliens shooting lasers and stuff like that. So I wanted to, I don't know, I wanted to create something that's a little bit different, that has I use science fiction as a vehicle to convey certain ideas. The science fiction that I like, Stanislav Lem, Kurt Vonnegut, Philip Dick. These are the people who wrote books because they wanted to write books, and not because they wanted to write science fiction. I don't know. I of course I enjoy Marvel superheroes and DC and whatnot, but they're just popcorn. They're good popcorn, and I love it. I watch it. I wait I can't wait for the next installment, but I don't come away with anything but being entertained. from it. So that was the very idea, to create, well, basically a mixture of literary fiction, science fiction, and a bunch of crazy idea wrapped in this kind of conglomerate of, I don't know, weird humor and all in between.
Yeah, I feel like when you're writing either science fiction or fantasy and you're bringing those ethical and moral questions up, it's almost a safer space to do that. So if you did it in a thriller or a contemporary mystery, that it's more obvious and in your face. Whereas if you go into the sci-fi genre, then you're bringing up the same issues, right? But you're doing it in a safer space, and you're letting people explore that through a different lens. I saw, I listened to a podcast one time where it talked about fantasy was actually bad for kids to read because it didn't show them reality. And I kind of thought, I don't think that. I think it's actually helping them figure out, what they're going through in a safe space. And a lot of those things that the characters go through in sci-fi or fantasy novels, we can translate back to our own lives, but it's removed from us, so it doesn't feel as raw or scary, and maybe helps us think about it in a different way.
Right. Couldn't agree more.
And so before we started taping, you told me that you had like really big revelation. You're going to solve all the Earth's problems, and the meaning of life. So we are really interested to hear this.
Oh my! The meaning of life is that it has a meaning, but on different levels. So, for example, the meaning of life in general might be to produce plastic for humanity, but the meaning of life for us personally might be something else. And I'm against the notion of the universal meaning of life. I mean, life means something else to me, something else to you, and we all different people with different creeds, ideas, and whatnot. It's still important. So I don't think we should even look for a clear definition of what life really means and why are we here. By the way, would it change anything if I told you that the meaning of life was this or that? And probably you go back to your routine and, I don't know, your home or work or something. Hence, the universal meanings are kind of outdated, I think. As for me, I think the meaning of life, the life is meant to be lived. You basically, I'm sure that everybody makes mistakes. You should be able to fix them. If you can't fix them, then you should move on and be as happy as possible. Sometimes you should be sad. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being sad, and it's a part of life. I understand that, especially in the Western culture, we are pre-programmed to live a happy life, which is fine, but maybe life shouldn't always be happy. I mean, you should be happy sometimes, but it's made up of different moments, and I think each one of these moments has a meaning of its own. When I recall events from my life, both the sad, the happy, I don't know, whatever else. I think that altogether they created the person that I am. And without some of these, I wouldn't be who am I today. So I think it's important to have this outlook of life as a collection of memories, things happening, and that eventually create something. And there is no right or wrong. There is no this is what your life should turn out like. It never does, by the way.
I think I realized that at like age 22, maybe. Up until then, I was like, well, everything's going great. And then yeah, I had this picture of how it was supposed to be or what I was supposed to do, and then like, I really don't have to do it that way. That was like an
Right.
aha moment for me. But yeah, I mean, what is happiness without sadness, right? There's a yin and yang, and to everything. So how would we know we were happy if we were never sad? You can't have one without the other.
Right.
Yeah, so life is rich.
Should be.
I have a question. So you're a visual artist as well, correct?
Yes.
What made you decide to write a book?
Because why do I write a book? Because I'm a storyteller, essentially, and I tell stories through paintings, through illustrations, through photography, and through writing. It's all part of the same thing for me. It's a form of expression, and I can express myself differently when I write story. I can express myself differently when I do a painting. But ultimately, it's some part of me going out into the world. And I think I wouldn't be able to express myself completely only with creating paintings or illustrations. I needed to actually write something, because sometimes you usually have to say certain things, and it's impossible to to do it in any other way. And I like writing. It's a form of expression that I cherish since ever I remember. There were several attempts to finish a novel. I think I've written something like 5, and they all unfinished, and they're really bad. And the Great Convergence, now I've been working on it for 10 years altogether. Now I didn't write it all the time. Of course, I was writing something and leaving it for a year, coming back to it, etc., until eventually I said, okay, I have to do it. And I did, and I finished. I think the last year and a half, more or less. I put a lot of effort into it. They went through several editors until it got its shape. And I think, comparing to other forms of expression, literature it's to me it seems more personal, because it's like somebody's talking directly to you. You can see a painting, and you see the world through somebody's eyes, but it's, I don't know, it creates this kind of a distance, because you're looking at something, whereas when you read a book, it's your own voice in your own head telling you the story, and you add your own imagination to it. So writing is like anything else, I would say, in terms of I don't know, creating a world that wouldn't exist otherwise.
That's neat. Yeah, I came through this, like I said, I was in science before, so when somebody said I was creative, it took me a minute to wrap my head around that as an author. But yes, it is a creative endeavor, and that's really neat that you have both sides of that. The visual, I have no visual ability whatsoever, so anybody that can do that is like amazing to me. And I guess the voice is because when you're reading something, it is that voice, and unless you're listening to it, and then it's someone else's voice, which is a different experience for me too, listening to a book. Because it does, like, if it's not the right, if I've read it before, or if it doesn't seem the right voice to me, then it's hard for me. And so I learned that I had to like preview an audiobook to make sure I like the voice before I listened to or read a book in that way, in that format. Like some books I would just rather read than listen to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So The Great Convergence is your book, and you said you had 4 or 5 more on the back burner. Are you going to do something with one of those?
Yes, right now, and I actually I'm going to finish very soon a comic book series. 4 issues ready. They're all unpublished. There's going to be 6 in the series, and I think they're coming out in if everything goes well in the coming months. And this is where I combine illustration with the script I have of this the script, obviously, and it's also science fiction, philosophical science fiction, a satire on humanity. The story goes like this: Lord Babla, a rich aristocrat living on remote planet, maintains an enormously huge lab where he conducts all sort of really weird experiments. His research assistant goes missing or dies under suspicious circumstances. So he starts. So he attempts to recreate him. And he creates all sort of mutations which are all disagreeable and horrible, and he incinerates them the same instant, until eventually creates the pet thing, which is basically a big yellow head with 4 small feet. And it's still disagreeable and horrible, and unfortunately the incinerator is out of fuel. So Lord Babla tells the pet thing, okay, I have no choice, but I have to improve on what I've brought into being. So he takes the pet thing on a trek across the universe, showing him different civilizations and praising the civilization in progress. Now, the thing is, the pet thing is being mercilessly brainwashed by Lord Babla, who shows him exactly what he wants to show him, praises things that he wants to praise, and basically the pet thing is really innocent, and it writes the right questions, but always get the wrong answers. It's upon the reader to realize what's really going on. And they travel to, I think that in the first part they travel to the place where they manipulate time. It's this kind of a time consortium who transform time into money into time, because as far as physics is concerned, time and money are exactly the same thing. And in the next part, there's a planet where they poison the place with noxious fumes, then suck them up with different machines, and use the powder to do some really nefarious things. And why do they do it? Because the way they call it, it's circular economy. People have stuff to do, and resources flow, the economy grows, and it's great for everybody, etc., etc. And in another comic book, they just shoot stars. Because why do they shoot stars? Because there are so many, and they would if they don't shoot stars, they turn into black holes and start cannibalizing one another, and they fight for the nebulae dust, and so they have to shoot them for the goodness of the environment, and they do, etc., etc. So again, this is not as subtle as the Great Convergence. And of course, again, I try not to moralize too much. Sometimes, and here's the catch, some readers will agree with Lord Babla, okay, while some readers will agree with pet thing, and you can agree with whomever you wish. There are 2 different points of view. One is Lord Babla, is pet thing, and have at it and think what's right and what's wrong. Make up your own mind.
Very cool. Yes, you answered my question, because I was going to say, are you going to do an illustrated novel or a graphic novel? But comics, that's awesome.
Yeah, I just did.
Very
It was a lot of fun. I have to say, it's widely psychedelic, with really vivid colors and rich textures. I've been preparing the whole. I'm working on. I think it's half a year already. It takes me a couple of months to finish an issue, along with writing the script. And the problem is with novel, you can basically you can keep talking, but with comic book it has to be really succinct and to the point. The real estate is scarce, so you have to make a point and move on.
Right.
Quickly.
Yeah. It seems like it would be harder because you only have a certain number of words that you can use, and a lot of things are described or told through the pictures. And do you publish that like you would a novel?
I will be publishing it first in digital form, and it's going to be available in print at a later stage. Like I said, there's six parts in the first series, and if everything goes well, I'm going to continue until I die, I guess, or maybe not.
Awesome. I think of all the comics I loved as a kid, and one of my favorite things was when, I don't know if in Switzerland if you have this, but the Sunday paper used to have like the color comics when the Sunday
Right.
paper came. So I would, climb up in my dad's lap and we would read the comics together. Good memories. Do you have the same thing in Switzerland, or
Sorry?
did you have the same in Switzerland with the Sunday paper?
Not really. Unfortunately, there isn't as the comic scene is not as well developed. However, there are several publishers that translate many French works into German, because we live in Zurich, so the French is pretty much the same in Geneva, but that's the German speaking part of Switzerland. So there is a lot of imported stuff from France and Belgium. Unfortunately, it's just for certain type of people, it's not as prevalent in Switzerland as in other parts of Europe, sadly. And there's a couple of newspapers that they have some satirical joining, but as for comic, not so much. There's few things I'd rather not talk about because I don't like them. I'm sorry for that.
That's quite all right. Yeah, and I hadn't thought about, like, I read my kids' graphic novels with them, but I hadn't thought about an adult comic and how that would be. It would come out just like a regular ebook, right?
Yes, I think these days it's much easier, more convenient to publish comics as an ebook, because I started reading. I switched to reading comics on an iPad. You have the whole library at your fingertips, and you can enlarge certain parts, whatever it is that you like. And with paper, it's the experience is different. Like paper, I still read paper books, but as for comics, I prefer digital media. It's much more convenient.
That makes complete sense. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could enjoy them much more. Yeah, on your device, right? Very cool.
Yeah, in terms of creation, it's much easier to do comics digitally. I've been drawing comics with any tool imaginable until I finally switched to Apple Pencil and iPad. And why? Because it allows you to work much faster, and you don't waste paper, which is also good for the environment. The thing is, sometimes when you draw, you have to, when you see, I don't know, even Marvel comics and whatnot, it seems that it's been really effortlessly done. Like it looks like, I don't know, 1 minute drawing, but the truth of the matter is you have to draw it again and again and again. Sometimes you could take a day to get something right. And with paper, you just sheet after sheet after sheet. With iPad, you just erase it and do something else. But this is the whole process. It's all created with hands. It's not like whatever editing software. I design all my digital brushes myself. Everything is custom made.
Very cool.
I don't use anything off the shelf. All the textures which I scanned especially to add to the comic. All of this it's been specifically created for the particular purpose.
That's amazing. It seems like it's going to be really detailed. I had never thought about like the process it would take to do illustrations in a book, but I just work with an artist. My upcoming release, later this month, is an illustrated novel, and there's 10 full color illustrations, so it's not a comic book, it's more a novel with illustrations. But I hadn't really even thought about the process that the artist would go through. And what he did is he hand drew the sketches, and then he digitized them, and then he colorized them and put in all the layers of colors and the shading and all of those things. But it was very interesting to me. But I could see where if you just did it on the pad with your Apple pen or however that's done in the beginning, then you could skip the color and digitizing or the drawing, the paper stuff. You skip the paper stuff. Makes a lot of sense.
And it is, I have to say, it is more difficult to draw on an iPad because of the friction. These things don't provide as much friction. I tried all tips and whatnot, but it's much easier to draw with a pencil. However, there are also advantages. It's right there, and you don't have to maintain, I don't know, like 50 different markers or paints. It's all created on the fly.
This is really exciting. So it's really great to learn about the Great Divergence. Can you tell people where they would find your book and you?
Okay, you can find me on my website, www.thomaskast.com. And my book is available on Amazon. So will be the comic books on my website. You can find everything about all of my projects, the photography, fine art, illustration, the comic books. There are 3 sample chapters of the Great Convergence, so you can read it and try before you buy.
Thanks.
Or post angry comments, if you will. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. Well, more or less that this is where you could find me. Now, of course, I maintain the Facebook account, which I hardly look at. Well, maybe once a month, so not much of a social media person.
Yes, that can be tiring to keep up with lots of social media.
Yeah, well, especially it depends on the temperament, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Some extroverted people may love it. I cannot. Yeah, I feel each way. It depends on my mood. Well, thank you so much for being here, Thomas. We really appreciate it. And all the listeners out there can find you at www.thomaskast.com, as well as there will be links in the description of the podcast. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.